Imagine a perfect picture, a quiet town in Iowa. A familiar morning show host prepares for her early broadcast. She never runs late, but this morning she never shows up. At her home, police discover signs of a struggle, scattered belongings, a bent car key still in the lock. It looks like a brutal abduction, doesn't it? The first suspect was obsessed with her. 2 days before her disappearance, they had an argument. He failed a polygraph test. The case seems simple, but is it? Then comes a new detail. A neighbor hears a woman scream and spots a white van speeding away from the parking lot. Who would you believe? The evidence pointing to a friend, or the testimony describing a mysterious stranger? And here's the key clue. A palm print found on Jody's car. It doesn't belong to Van's size. It doesn't match anyone in the database. The most promising lead leads nowhere. Years pass. New witnesses surface. New theories emerge. Drug traffickers, serial killers. Each one seems possible, but all collapse under scrutiny. Can you piece together the puzzle when every new fragment only makes the picture more confusing? June 27, 1995, began as a typical summer morning in Mason City, Iowa. The sky was clear. A soft, warm breeze stirred the fresh green leaves across town. Cars were already starting to appear on the roads as locals hurried to work. At the regional TV station KMT-TV, the staff were preparing for the morning broadcast. According to the schedule, the anchor was Jody Houston, a 27-year-old journalist who had risen rapidly in her career. Colleagues often praised her punctuality and professionalism. Jody liked to arrive earlier than anyone else, carefully rehearse the script, and check every line before going live. Before moving to Mason City, Jody's life was a story of determination and ambition. Born in the small town of Long Prairie, Minnesota, she had dreamed of television since childhood. In school, she practiced gymnastics and track, earning a scholarship to St. Cloud State University. There, she worked tirelessly, producing student reports, hosting morning radio shows, and building a reputation for being energetic, reliable, and always positive. After graduation, she worked in Fort Collins and Alexandria before joining KMT in 1993, an opportunity full of promise for a young woman seeking independence and professional growth. Jody lived in a small apartment complex on Golf Course Road, just minutes from downtown. It was a quiet neighborhood surrounded by parks, trimmed lawns, and small buildings where everyone knew each other by name. She quickly became part of the community, attending local events, keeping friendly ties with her neighbors, and living openly. At work, she was admired for her energy, beauty, and confident screen presence. For thousands of viewers, she was the warm, familiar face of the morning news, cheerful, professional, and trustworthy. Outside of work, Jody loved staying active. She ran in city marathons, swam regularly, biked, and enjoyed long walks. Friends described her as punctual, always answering calls, and meticulous about keeping promises. Her mornings followed a routine. On June 27th, she likely woke up around 4:30, showered, tied her hair into a neat ponytail, dressed in a light blouse and dark trousers, had oatmeal with fruit for breakfast, and drove her red Mazda to work. By 5:40, she usually arrived at the station, early enough to fix her hair, review the script, and discuss the lineup with the producers. Her broadcast was set for 6 o'clock sharp. Colleagues were well aware of her strict morning routine, and they knew if Jody wasn't at the studio 15 minutes before airtime, it was a serious sign of trouble. That morning, her seat at the anchor desk was taken by producer Amy Kunz. When calls to Jody went unanswered, Amy's concern grew quickly. It wasn't just about professionalism. In 2 years, Jody had never missed a single broadcast and always responded immediately to any message from the station. Phone calls to her home rang out with no answer. Her colleagues tried her cell phone, but it too went unanswered. Soon the shift supervisor realized Jody was not coming and contacted the local police. In a small town, any break from daily routine was taken seriously, especially when it involved the disappearance of a beloved local news anchor. That morning would forever change the lives of Jody Houston, friends, family, and colleagues. In only a few hours, she had gone from being a familiar face delivering the news to becoming the subject of the town's greatest mystery. By 7 o'clock on June 27, 1995, Mason City Police received the formal missing person report. Sergeant James Larson took the call from Kim TTV staff and immediately dispatched 4 patrol cars and 2 detectives to Jody's apartment complex on Golf Course Road. When officers arrived at 1408 Golf Course Road, what they found left no doubt that her disappearance was non-voluntary. The parking lot outside the small apartment building was littered with her personal belongings, silent witnesses to something violent. The first item to catch their attention was a red Conair hair dryer, the same one Jody used every morning to style her light chestnut hair before going on air. It lay on the pavement about 10 feet from the front door, tangled cord, scratched casing, as if dropped or ripped from her hands during a struggle. Around 15 feet away lay a pair of black leather pumps, size 7, the kind Jody preferred for studio work. The shoes were apart from each other, one near the curb, the other beneath a juniper bush. Faint stains on the right shoe's insole would later be confirmed as blood. The most troubling find was her set of keys, both home and car, lying next to her red Mazda. The ignition lock showed signs of force, bent metal and scratches, as if someone had either tried to start the car without the key or prevent it from starting at all. Inside the vehicle was Jody's small leather purse with driver's license, credit cards, and about $40 in cash, ruling out robbery as the primary motive. Her glove compartment contained work documents, interview tapes, and a notebook of future story ideas. The car's engine was cold, meaning it hadn't run for hours. The fuel tank was nearly full, and the vehicle was mechanically sound. Inside her second-floor apartment, there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. The door was locked, windows shut, alarm system intact. Her work shoes were neatly placed in the entryway. On the coat rack hung her light blazer for on-air appearances. The bed was made, if hastily, suggesting she woke early, tidied the bed, and headed to the bathroom. On the nightstand were her wristwatch, a graduation photo, and a stack of journalism books. The bathroom held one puzzling detail. The toilet seat was left up. Detectives noted this as unusual for a woman living alone, especially one as meticulous and organized as Jody. On her kitchen table were scripts, local news summaries, weather notes, and other materials for her upcoming broadcast. Beside them, a half-finished cup of coffee and a plate with the remains of toast, all signs she had been preparing for a normal workday. Neighbors provided the first clues about the pre-dawn hours. Dorothy Harris, who lived next door, said she was awakened around 4:30 a.m. by the sound of a woman screaming in the parking lot, frightened, desperate, but too far away to hear words. Another neighbor, Robert Campbell, reported that around 4:35 he heard loud knocking on a first-floor apartment door and a male voice calling out, "Open the door. I know you're in there." The sounds lasted several minutes, then silence. No one saw the man's face or could describe a car. The parking lot was poorly lit, and most residents were still asleep. Crime scene technicians identified tire tracks not belonging to any resident's car, consistent with a mid-size sedan, possibly a late 80s or early 90s Ford or Chevrolet. The tracks led from the spot where Jody's belongings were scattered toward the lot's exit. Fingerprints found on her possessions belonged only to Jody. No foreign prints appeared on the keys, hairdryer, or shoes, suggesting the abductor wore gloves or meticulously wiped the items clean. One of the most puzzling details in Jody's disappearance was the fact that her cell phone was never found. Unlike her other belongings scattered across the parking lot, the phone vanished along with her. Phone company records showed that her last call was made at 11:45 p.m. on June 26th, a 4-minute conversation with a friend. By noon on June 27th, it had become painfully clear that Jody Houston was the victim of a violent crime. The signs of a struggle, scattered possessions, the damaged car lock, and the neighbors' testimonies left little doubt that she had been abducted against her will. Mason City Police officially opened an investigation and requested assistance from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. The case was given the highest priority. The disappearance of a popular morning news anchor in a quiet Midwestern town immediately caught the attention of regional and national media. Who could have taken her right outside her home? Was it a spontaneous act of violence or a carefully planned abduction? And, perhaps most hauntingly, was Jody still alive when the search began? During the first 48 hours, detectives interviewed more than 50 people connected to Jody. Colleagues, friends, former boyfriends, neighbors, and even television viewers who had written or called the station. The first person to draw investigators' attention was John Van Cise, a 37-year-old local businessman who was one of Jody's closest friends, and some believed wanted something more. Van Cise owned a small sporting goods company and was a well-known figure in town. His friendship with Jody had developed over the previous several months. They had met at a charity event where he was a sponsor and she served as the master of ceremonies. Their connection quickly turned into a close friendship, lunches, movie nights, and local events. Yet opinions differed. Some insisted there was a romantic element. Others said Jody saw him only as a friend. Those who knew John described moments of jealousy whenever Jody spent time with other men. The key incident that raised suspicion was Jody's 27th birthday party on June 25th, just 2 days before she disappeared. The celebration took place at a popular local restaurant attended by about 30 guests, including co-workers and friends. Witnesses later told police that John's behavior that night was tense, irritable. He made sharp remarks when Jody talked to other men. Toward the end of the evening, the two had a brief but noticeable argument, after which Van Cise left without saying goodbye. A friend, Mary Anderson, told detectives she heard John say something like, "You'll regret this," or "This isn't over," though she couldn't recall his exact words. Jody seemed upset, but continued hosting the party. When detectives questioned Van Cise on June 28th, his statements appeared inconsistent. He claimed he had been home alone the night Jody vanished, watching television, and went to bed early. No one could confirm his whereabouts between 4 and 6 a.m., the estimated time frame of the abduction. When asked if he and Jody were romantically involved, his answers were vague. He spoke of a special friendship, understanding, and deep respect, but offered little clarity. Detectives also noted that his emotional reaction during questioning was extreme. He cried openly, showing visible stress. On June 30th, Van Cise agreed to take a polygraph. The results were inconclusive. The test registered stress responses to key questions about Jody's disappearance, but no definitive signs of deception. While investigators were still examining Van Cise's involvement, they pursued other leads as well. One avenue involved the letters and phone calls Jody had received from admirers. Over her 2 years at Kim TV, she had accumulated dozens of notes, from harmless fan messages to disturbing declarations of love. Among the most persistent correspondence was a man named Thomas Miller, a 43-year-old unemployed resident of a nearby county. For nearly a year, he had sent Jody flowers, gifts, and lengthy letters describing his feelings. In the last few messages, his tone had turned threatening. He wrote that Jody belonged to him and that he would not allow other men to destroy their connection. When police located Miller, they learned he was under psychiatric care for severe schizophrenia and, at the time of Jody's disappearance, had been hospitalized, giving him a solid alibi. Still, his obsession revealed how vulnerable Jody's public life had become. Another direction of inquiry focused on her co-workers at Kim T. Detectives interviewed every employee, reporters, producers, camera crew, and even cleaning staff, looking for signs of rivalry, resentment, or professional tension. But everyone described Jody as friendly, professional, and kind. She avoided office politics, never competed aggressively, and maintained positive relationships with everyone on staff. No one could name a single person who might have wished her harm. By early July, investigators turned their attention to Tony Jackson, a 24-year-old college student recently arrested for a string of sexual assaults in the Mason City area. Jackson was already in jail awaiting trial for rape and attempted murder when a fellow inmate came forward. The prisoner claimed Jackson had confessed to abducting the famous TV girl, hinting that her body would never be found. Detectives interrogated Jackson immediately. He denied everything, and his alibi held. At the time of Jody's disappearance, he was in county custody, awaiting sentencing on prior charges. Still, rumors about his alleged confession spread quickly, adding confusion and speculation to an already complex case. By August of 1995, investigators had concluded that none of the initial suspects could be tied to the crime with any degree of certainty. John Van Cise remained a person of interest, though investigators had no concrete evidence to justify an arrest. Other potential suspects were eliminated through verified alibis or lack of motive. Despite massive efforts, hundreds of volunteers, search dogs, aerial units, and checks of every lake and wooded area within a 30-mile radius of Mason City, the search reached a dead end. Jody's body was never found. There were no eyewitnesses to her abduction, and physical evidence was scarce. The case, which had initially seemed solvable given the visible crime scene and numerous clues, turned into one of the most perplexing disappearances in the history of the state of Iowa. Who was the man knocking on Jody's door in the early hours of June 27th? And how, despite every resource and every lead, had his identity never been discovered? By the fall of 1995, the disappearance of Jody Houston had become one of the most talked-about crimes in Iowa. Both local and national media continued to circulate stories, drawing the attention of private investigators, amateur sleuths, and self-proclaimed witnesses who claimed to have information about Jody's fate. In September, a woman named Deborah Gill from a nearby town contacted Mason City Police. She claimed to have seen Jody the night she disappeared. According to her statement, around 2:00 a.m. on June 27th, while driving home from work, she noticed a white car pulled over on Highway 18 with its hazard lights flashing. Next to it stood two men and a blonde woman who looked terrified and disoriented. One of the men, Jill said, was gripping the woman's wrist as if preventing her from running away. Assuming it was just a roadside breakdown or minor accident, Deborah kept driving. Only later, after seeing Jody's picture on the news, did she realize that the frightened woman might have been the missing anchor. Detectives examined her account carefully, but it couldn't be verified. The location she described was 25 miles from Jody's apartment, and the timeline conflicted with other reports. Neighbors had heard a struggle between 4:30 and 5 a.m., hours after Gill's alleged sighting. Then, in October, a new lead emerged. Local farmer Ron Hampton reported finding a woman's wristwatch on his property about 12 miles from Mason City, a silver Timex with a metal band. When shown the item, Jody's mother, Maureen Houston, recognized it immediately. It had been a graduation gift for her daughter. The discovery site was deep within an abandoned farmland area rarely visited by anyone. There were no paved roads nearby, only rough dirt paths accessible by trucks or tractors. Police organized an extensive search around the area, but no other evidence was found. Forensics revealed that the watch had stopped at 4:47 a.m., almost exactly matching the presumed time of Jody's abduction. No foreign DNA was recovered from the metal band. Only Jody's own skin cells were present. The clue, chilling as it was, did not bring investigators any closer to identifying her abductor. In November, the case took another turn. The Iowa Narcotics Enforcement Division reported a possible connection between Jody's disappearance and local drug trafficking operations. Agents suspected that Mason City was part of a corridor used to transport cocaine and methamphetamine from Minnesota toward the southern states. Some informants described the traffickers as ruthless, willing to silence anyone who interfered. Could Jody have uncovered something she wasn't supposed to see? Perhaps she had been researching a story that touched on the drug trade. Detectives reviewed every piece of her recent work, from news scripts to interview notes, but found no indication that she had investigated anything criminal. Her reporting focused entirely on community news, sports, and culture, not organized crime. Still, police carried out multiple raids across Cerro Gordo County. 8 suspects were arrested, large caches of drugs and weapons were seized. Yet none of the detainees could offer information about Jody Houston. By late winter of 1995 into 96, another name surfaced: Robert Bradford, a 42-year-old long-haul truck driver who regularly passed through Mason City on his route between Minneapolis and Des Moines. Bradford was already known to authorities for prior assaults on women at roadside stops and truck plazas. The tip came from his ex-wife, who contacted police after learning about Jody's case. She claimed that on the morning of June 27th, Bradford had returned home in a nervous, agitated state, covered in dirt, changing his story multiple times about where he had been. While cleaning his truck, she found a pair of women's earrings he couldn't explain. Police arrested Bradford and searched his house and vehicle. The earrings matched the description of a pair Jody often wore. However, because the design was mass-produced, forensic experts couldn't conclusively tie them to her. More importantly, his employer's records showed he had indeed been on the road at the critical time. His delivery log placed him passing through Mason City between 3 and 6 a.m., the same window when Jody vanished. It meant he had the opportunity, but surveillance footage from a gas station 50 miles away proved he had stopped there around 5 a.m., narrowing the chance of his involvement. The truck driver's timeline ruled him out. It would have been impossible for him to reach Mason City, commit the abduction, and make it back to the gas station on schedule. Bradford was released, but remained under quiet police observation. By the spring of 1996, attention again turned to Tony Jackson, the college student whose name had previously surfaced because of a cellmate's claim. Jackson had since been convicted of multiple sexual assaults and sentenced to life in prison. Yet he continued to insist he had nothing to do with Jody Houston's disappearance. The situation grew more complicated when another inmate, Michael Stevens, also came forward, alleging that Jackson had confessed to murdering the missing anchor. Stevens claimed Jackson described details never made public, including that Jody's body had been hidden in an abandoned well near his uncle's farm. Police immediately searched the property, but nothing was found. Then came a critical discovery. Jackson's uncle had died 3 years before Jody disappeared, and the farm had long since been sold. Stevens' testimony collapsed under scrutiny. It was clear he had fabricated the story, most likely hoping for leniency in his own sentence. By the summer of 1996, the investigation had ground to a halt. Detectives had followed hundreds of leads, interviewed over 1,000 people, and reviewed countless tips. Yet no one could be charged. The case of Jody Houston was officially classified as a cold case, to be reopened only if new information surfaced. Still, Jody's family refused to give up. Her parents hired private investigator Steve Ridge, a former FBI agent specializing in missing persons. He announced a $10,000 reward for any credible information about Jody's fate. Ridge focused on a theory official investigators had largely dismissed, that Jody had been abducted by someone local, someone familiar with her schedule and habits. He believed the crime was planned, not random, and that the perpetrator might still live in or around Mason City. But even Ridge's independent investigation brought no breakthrough. Nearly 3 decades later, the disappearance of Jody Houston remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Who was the man who abducted a beloved television anchor in the early morning quiet of small-town Iowa? And how, after all these years, has his identity never been discovered? In 2001, the case reached a somber milestone. 6 years after the events of June 27, 1995, an Iowa court officially declared Jody Houston deceased. The decision, made at her family's request, was necessary to settle legal and insurance matters. But the formal declaration of death did not end their search for truth. Jody's parents, Maureen and Jim Houston, continued to fight for answers. They established the Find Jody Foundation, dedicated both to preserving her memory and funding further private investigations. By this time, the reward for information had grown to $50,000, one of the largest ever offered in Iowa for a missing persons case. The money came through public donations from Kim T viewers, colleagues, local business owners, and concerned citizens across the country. Steve Ridge carried on with renewed determination, using advanced technology unavailable in the 1990s, re-interviewing key witnesses, searching previously overlooked sites, and comparing Jody's case with other unsolved crimes in the region. One line of his inquiry focused on a disturbing pattern. Between 1994 and 1997, several women working in media across neighboring counties had been attacked or killed. In Floyd County, local radio host Christine Morrison vanished without a trace. In Franklin County, newspaper reporter Sarah Thompson was found murdered. And in Butler County, a receptionist at a local TV station survived a violent assault, later describing her attacker as a dark-haired man in his 40s who seemed to know her daily routine. Ridge theorized that these cases could be connected, that a single offender, possibly a serial predator, specifically targeted women with public or media-related professions. Perhaps he harbored resentment toward journalists or fixated on their visibility. However, police remained skeptical. The circumstances of the crimes differed in method, timing, and geography, not a consistent pattern for a serial killer. What looked like a chilling connection might, after all, have been only coincidence. In 2005, the case of Jody Houston received new momentum, thanks to the rapid development of DNA technology. Forensic experts re-examined every piece of evidence collected from the scene, traces of blood on her shoe, samples from the damaged car lock, and fibers found in the parking lot. Modern analysis revealed a new clue: DNA from an unknown male, extracted from the metal band of the watch discovered on Ron Hampton's farm. The genetic profile was entered into CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. A single partial match appeared to a man named Richard Lawrence, 35 years old, from neighboring Minnesota. He had previously been arrested for assaulting a woman in a parking lot and worked as a truck driver who often traveled through Iowa, including the Mason City area. Detectives questioned him immediately, but Lawrence denied any connection to Jody's disappearance. His alibi held. On the night of June 27, 1995, he had been in North Dakota, treated by medical personnel after a highway accident. The DNA match turned out to be familial. Lawrence was distantly related to the real source of the genetic material, a man who could not be identified. His DNA was not in any database. By 2010, 15 years after Jody vanished, her family launched a new media campaign to revive public interest. Billboards and posters went up across Iowa. Television interviews, news specials, and online memorial pages all told her story again. The campaign produced an unexpected response. A man named Marcus Johnson, 40 years old, contacted investigators claiming he had witnessed a disturbing scene the night Jody disappeared. He said that around 3 a.m., while refueling his truck in Mason City, he saw a man forcing a blonde woman into the trunk of a car. Johnson assumed it was a domestic argument and did not intervene. Years later, after recognizing Jody's picture, he realized what he might have seen. He described the man as middle-aged, dark-haired, average build, and walking with a limp on his left leg. Investigators pulled security footage from that gas station. but found the cameras had been out of order that night. No other witnesses came forward, and the scene Johnson described could not be corroborated. It also emerged that Johnson struggled with alcoholism and had made false statements in previous cases. By 2015, every conventional investigative path had been exhausted. The disappearance of Jody Houston had become one of the most infamous cold cases in American history, the subject of books, documentaries, and podcasts. Iowa State Police continued reviewing files, chasing new leads, and responding to public tips. But each effort ended the same way, without enough evidence to accuse anyone. Then, in 2022, workers at a construction site near Mason City uncovered items buried deep in the soil, a woman's ring and bracelet. They had rested there nearly a meter underground, untouched for decades. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the ring belonged to Jody. Inside the band was an engraving, JH93, her initials, and the year she graduated from college. The discovery reignited hope, but offered no closure. No bones, no biological material, and no new forensic clues were found. In the 1990s, the site had been an empty field, open and accessible to anyone. By 2025, 30 years after her disappearance, the case remains open. Jody's parents, now well into their 70s, still hope for justice, though they know time is running out. Many witnesses and possible suspects have died. Memories have faded. Evidence has degraded beyond recovery. Modern forensic techniques, genealogical DNA, advanced analytics, computer modeling, could one day reveal new leads. But for now, the samples left behind are too limited to test. The story of Jody Houston stands as a symbol for thousands of missing persons cases across America. It is a reminder that even in small towns that seem safe, unspeakable crimes can occur and remain unanswered for generations. And it is a reminder that time does not heal for the families left behind. It only deepens the ache of uncertainty. The disappearance of a beloved morning anchor on a quiet Iowa morning remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern times. Perhaps the truth will never surface. Or perhaps, somewhere out there, someone still knows exactly what happened that morning and has stayed silent for 30 years. Thank you for watching. If you found Jody's story compelling, please share it. Every voice helps keep her memory alive.